Hi, I'm Max Kaiser, and you're on the edge. Speaking of on the edge, let's go to New York City and talk with Danny Schechter, the news dissector. Danny, welcome back to On the Edge.
Thank you. I'm always on the edge, Max. It's no change for me, so I'm pleased to be with you.
All right, Danny, your latest piece written for Al Jazeera is entitled Obama's Job Speech May Save Just One Job, His Own. Tell us about it.
Well, that seems to be the case. The polls are showing, support for Obama, I think largely because he was for the first time sort of standing up to the Republicans and being, extremely outspoken, demanding that his new jobs bill gets passed. And he seems to be taking a stand, which many people have felt he hasn't done for a long time, that he's really always ready to compromise even before negotiations are concluded. In this particular case, he's taking a hard stand, but many people who are economists are saying a couple of things. First, the Republicans have said already they're not going along with it. Employers basically have said they are not going along with it, and those are the people who supposedly will create the new jobs that he wants to see created. But more importantly, a lot of economists are saying this is the wrong approach, that it doesn't really deal with the structural challenges in the economy. It doesn't deal with the debt overhang that exists, all the bad debt on the banks' balance sheets and the like, and that this will not really create jobs. So it's a jobs bill that seems to be motivated more by keeping a job, his own, to show leadership. People are saying that they prefer his policies to the policies of the Republicans. On the other hand, the Republicans have mostly been negative. They're against whatever Obama is for. So they haven't really articulated any kind of real plan to create jobs, and no one expects that they will. So it doesn't look like there are new jobs on the horizon here. Certainly, Robert Reich has said that. Certainly, Paul Krugman has said that.
All right, well, when talking of the economy and the U.S. economy and how to fix the U.S. economy, how to get the U.S. economy growing, it seems like there are three choices. Choice number one is this job stimulus package as iterated by Barack Obama, $447 billion, more deficit spending, putting the country deeper into debt already. Now the country is 100% debt to GDP. Door number two is the austerity approach. We see this in Greece. We see it tried in the UK. And it's not working either in those places. Door number three is looking at the word that you just used, structural. The banks themselves are the problem, it seems, that until the administration begins to address the structural problem of the banks and their larcenistic tendencies, neither austerity or deficit spending is going to work. Danny Schechter.
I would ring a bell if I had one here to say go, Max, go, because you're really explaining, what the choices really are here. The problem is the Obama speech did not acknowledge any mistakes, did not distance himself from the policies of Geithner and Summers and his other aides who have been cozy with Wall Street. And so there's no real suggestion here that this is a serious departure. At one point in his speech, he says, look, I'm not advocating class warfare. Hello, why not? Why not? Because clearly there is class warfare going on, except it's one-sided. It's the people at the top waging war on the people at the bottom. And there's nobody really standing up for them and defending them. And that's part of the problem here, kind of waffling in the middle, which is what this is trying to do, promoting basically what would be temporary jobs. Let's fix a bridge, let's fix a highway, and then what? Nobody says anything. So, it's not clear that this approach is really an approach of creating the kinds of jobs that, let's say, they were envisaging with new industries and the like. I just read a report today in the New York Times about, jobs being created in Detroit, at Chrysler, making new cars, and their workers are being paid $14 an hour, whereas they used to be paid $28 an hour or something like that. So workers are working for less, they're working harder, and it's not clear that this is really having the kind of economic effect that the government says it wants. And so it looks like there's a policy of failure all around and an unwillingness to go after fraud, financial crime, and all of the other impotence, that make it impossible to make change. Unless you deal with the people who have basically ripped off this economy the way they have, you're not going to really get anywhere by giving them more power and giving them more money.
All right, Danny Schechter, I want to digress a little bit here. Now, this show, On the Edge, goes out to a global audience, and every day I hear people asking me why in America are Americans seemingly incapable of understanding how they're being victimized by their banks. The answer is that there is no left-wing media in America, full stop. Can you give us a portrait of the media spectrum from the ultra-far right to the center and those who are posing as left?
You know, unfortunately, there's a uniformity in the media when it comes to covering business. It's all pro-business. You know, the so-called liberal media, the centrist media, and the right-wing media are all sort of believers in the system and unwilling to really challenge it. We used to have labor reporters that reported on unions and workers and other perspectives, but they're all gone now. And a lot of the business press are people who studied in business schools, they have MBAs, they've worked in the industry as you once did, Max, and so they have a kind of bias towards the industry and towards its key sources, and they don't really challenge them. You know, you have in America, of course, everybody knows about the right-wing Fox News-oriented media, but you look at the business press, a lot of them are basically not very different in their outlook, particularly towards business, hoping it's successful, questioning regulation, challenging critics, demeaning workers. All of that seems to be characteristic, you know, of the U.S. media. In my book, The Crime of Our Time, about the financial crisis as a crime story, I go into some depth and detail about media complicity and about how the media not only hyped the bubble that punctured, but supports business systematically, and that other points of view are rarely heard. I mean, look at you, Max. I mean, you're on the air not on NBC or CBS, but on outlets all around the world. This ditto for myself. You know, it's hard to get on the air in America. And I work for ABC. I work for CNN. I work for CNBC. But I never get calls for interviews with the outlets that I work for. I only get, you know, calls for outlets in other countries who are far more open-minded in a way and less, you know, keyed into supporting our financial system. So the media is a big problem here. And it's a problem not only because it doesn't educate and doesn't inform, but it misinforms and miseducates and disseminates information that's totally inaccurate. And as a consequence, it's not surprising that people here don't know enough about what's going on. And as a result, there haven't been a lot of protests because people are like hungering for crumbs from the table. I mean, we saw Obama's speech. There's the head of the AFL-CIO sitting in the Congress, you know, looking approvingly, you know, at a speech that everybody knew wasn't going anywhere. So a lot of our politics is like a kabuki play. It's symbolic. It's not real.
One of the hallmarks of a thriving society is that the people who live in that society are curious about themselves and their surroundings. In America, it seems as though when it comes to matters of economic survival, Americans aren't even curious.
I don't think that's fair, Max. Let me tell you why. You know, 14 million families have lost or are losing their homes in foreclosures. These people know they're being unjustly treated. They're furious. They just don't know what to do about it. Nobody's really coming to their rescue, including the left, or what's left of the left, has not really aligned itself with these people who've been ripped off and are now being, you know, pushed out of their homes. People who have lost jobs, unemployed people. Unions represent employed people, not unemployed people. As a result, there's no real movement unifying people who don't have jobs with people who do have jobs. The AFL-CIO says they're going to do something about it. I think people are curious. They do want to know. They are interested. Look at the number of Americans that watch your show, you know, all over the world on different networks. You know, they are curious. They do want to find out. My film, Plunder, The Crime of Our Time, I have gotten requests for it from all over the world on our website, plunderthecrimeofourtime.com, trying to get the word out about financial crime and the like. But it is difficult when, you know, you've been basically marginalized. And that's what happens here. And it happens by design, not by accident. I don't have a PhD in economics from Harvard. I'm not, basically an economist, or the way they describe economists. And as a consequence, never mind that I went to the London School of Economics or the Cornell University School of Industrial and Labor Relations. It doesn't matter. I'm not in the industry, which means I'm not shilling for the industry. And that's what the problem is that, of the members of the American Economic Association, only 15 out of 15,000, predicted, the crash, the meltdown in the markets. I mean, that's disgraceful. That's despicable. These are the people who are supposed to know, and they don't know, or they won't speak out because they have so many conflicts of interest. So yes, people in America are victimized by their media system. They're not educated in our schools about money and about financial issues. And so they're victims. Let's not blame the victims for the crime.
Well, you mentioned a word like marginalized, and the world, by and large, is marginalizing the United States. They're not buying their U.S. Treasury bonds anymore. They're openly mocking the policies of Barack Obama. They think that the mass hysteria over 9/11, as Paul Krugman wrote in the New York Times, is more of an occasion for shame than it is for some introspection or soul searching. Donald Rumsfeld can't come to France without risk of being arrested and thrown in jail for human rights violations. Same with Bush, same with Cheney, same with other members of the administration. America has become marginalized by the curious, industrialized, progressive nations of the world who have things like health care. It's amazing, Danny Schechter, how in America a company like Groupon can get a bunch of people to lobby together to get a discount on sushi, but the idea of getting a bunch of people together lobbying for a discount on health care, suddenly, no, that's socialism. But a discount on sushi, that's capitalism.
Yeah, right. Sushi is capitalism, Japanese capitalism. But, Max, it's crazy. I'm right now, I work for ABC for 8 years. Now I'm a columnist on Al Jazeera's website. And that's reaching a lot of people. I've had 200,000 reads on some of my pieces. I get tremendous amount of mail and interest in it. I'm on RT. I'm on Press TV from time to time. I'm even on Australian radio. I'm on Saudi Arabian TV. BBC, a lot of other places. So yes, there's a market, there's interest, and there's a global economy, and there's a global society. Unfortunately, Americans are not really told about that very much. And this is a problem that we face as independent media people trying to reach out in our own country to try to offer news and information that's not available elsewhere. And, I find it's a disgrace. I've been battling this for years. I mean, I wrote a book, The More You Watch, The Less You Know, back in 1997. And I've written 11 books about media issues and how it impacts on 9/11, how it impacts on the financial crisis, the Iraq War, and all the rest of it. And, people read them, but it doesn't really lead to any change in policy because media is there to sell, not to tell. It's their marketing ideology, not questioning ideology. And that's why, this program, your work, is so important.
Going forward, we can't really expect any real journalism in the space of exposing the financial crime of our time, as you put it, except for maybe, I guess, the one guy that stands out is Matt Taibbi over there at the Rolling Stone magazine.
Who would have thunk that a rock and roll magazine would be the leader in critiquing Wall Street? And hats off to Matt Taibbi. But there are others. There's a big blogosphere. Let's not just focus on the mass media. Let's focus on, in a sense, the class media or the media that really is putting forth other points of view. Websites like mlimplode.com that monitors the media. Journalists, like Eve Smith at nakedcapitalism.com, and many others who are offering really analysis that's important, that's well researched, and provocative every day. So there is growing interest in all of this. Who would have, thunk that 400,000 Israelis would come out and protest in the streets against economic injustice in Israel.
Yeah, Danny Schechter, on this point about street protests and growing street protests around the world, there's something coming up called Occupy Wall Street, and right there in your neighborhood. First of all, tell us a little bit about the background here and what your thoughts are, how this is going to come together. Will it be successful? Some are calling for up to 20,000 people to occupy Wall Street. Tell us more about it.
Well, first of all, this is a call by Adbusters magazine, people who have been really making fun of and challenging corporate policies for years now. Unfortunately, they're based in Canada and don't have the kind of constituency here, but certainly there are a lot of activists who are responsive to their call. I've been reading their website. You know, it's Occupy Wall Street, and you know, there's a tremendous debate going on. Some saying, no, you should go to Times Square, not Wall Street. After all, the 17th of September is a Saturday, which means that Wall Street is largely closed, except there'll be tourists there. It's not clear that it will have the same impact of disrupting Wall Street that it would have on a work day. Secondly, there have been a number of rallies in Wall Street, but, you know, there's such a large police presence there. There's so many security services and officials that it's hard to get any critical mass. You know, they'd like to see Wall Street as a new Tahrir Square, like in Cairo. But I don't know if it'll happen. I don't know if they've left enough time for it to happen. So, you know, I'm hopeful something will happen, but I'm not betting on it.
You mentioned Seattle. I'm assuming you're referring to the Battle of Seattle going back to 1999. Of course, this was a major anti-globalization protest, as the movement was called then. And it seemed as though there was some traction going into that movement.
Yeah, but don't forget, there was the WTO meeting there. So there was a big event, which meant that there was a lot of media that was going to be there. You know, there's not going to be a lot of media on Wall Street on Saturday unless, you know, somehow they really disrupt or, you know, destroy the place, which I don't think they're going to be able to do. I mean, since 2001, there are more cameras on Wall Street as there are in the city of London than almost any other place in the world. There should be cameras on the inside of these firms so that we can keep an eye on what they're actually doing. But the cameras are on the people on the outside. And so there's a tremendous amount of surveillance, a big police presence. The New York City police are very good at logistics and at basically smothering protesters, putting them in various pens, dividing them, and all the rest of it. There have been some calls recently for various actions on Wall Street. The response wasn't great. I've been involved in a couple of protests on Wall Street. I know that people are angry, but, you know, you have to really do a lot more basic work in building coalition, building an alliance, and I'm not sure that they've done that. I wish they had, and I'd, you know, certainly be willing to help because I think it's very important that some larger statement be made. But maybe, you know, it's a trap to go into that canyon on Wall Street on a Saturday, and, you know, because you're no match, you know, for the police, which will sweep you out. And there's a lot of comments on the Occupy Wall Street website from various people debating what the best tactics and strategy is.
Well, around the world, we've seen what I call the global insurrection against banker occupation. We've seen it in Athens. We've seen it in Dublin, Cairo, Tunis, Madison, Wisconsin as well, to some degree. What form could a protest take in America? Because building a tent city on Wall Street, which is already surrounded by police, in a spot that now has become sacrosanct thanks to the events of 9/11. What kind of action, mass protest, could Americans who've been disenfranchised and who have been essentially kicked to the curb and forgotten about in this generation, how do you see any kind of meaningful protest coming together, if that's possible? Or is this generation of Americans simply going to be put on debt reservations and left to rot like the Americans did to the Indians 150 years ago?
You know, a lot of the protest leaders have been co-opted in various ways. They've taken money from Goldman Sachs. They've taken money from the banks. They're desperate. They're confused about what to do. You know, it's hard to respond when so many cases on the foreclosure front are different. Each individual has particularities in their cases. It's hard to get people to act. They're afraid to act. in many cases. They're afraid that if they do, they'll be, thrown out of their homes. They're always hoping until the last minute that they can convince the banks or convince the lenders, to let them stay in their homes and all the rest of it. So it's a hard issue to organize around, and young people, particularly university people, have to use their creativity. I mean, we have social media here. We've had Million Man marches in America. More could be done, and more should be done. But it can't be done just by one group out of Canada. It has to be done with an alliance with other people here, activists. I mean, I marched with Jesse Jackson on Wall Street 2008, just before Lehman Brothers went down. There have been unions marching there as well. But those marches are not really covered. They don't get the impact that they deserve. I mean, the AFL-CIO had 15,000 people marching towards Wall Street. It was like almost a non-event. So that's where the media comes in also. In Tahrir Square, if Al Jazeera hadn't been there, if world media hadn't been there, it wouldn't have had the impact that it had. And the media here is so compromised and sold out in so many ways that you can't really rely on them necessarily to cover this unless something really dramatic is done.
Recently, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman was ousted from heading up a national deal with banks over mortgage fraud. He was the dissenting voice. He didn't think the deal passed the smell test. Is there going to be any action taken at all against the financial terrorists?
Well, tremendous pressure came down on Schneiderman by the Obama administration, by the person heading up the Housing and Urban Development Department. Others in the saying, like, don't criticize the banks. We need their help. We need them to be healthy and all the rest of it. So there's been no real prosecutions of Wall Street criminals, and that's a demand that I think we need. I think a petition for a jail out, not just a bailout, is something that would be very popular with Americans. But we need help in getting it organized.
All right, Danny Schechter, that's all the time we have. Thanks for being on The Edge.
Bye-bye, Max. Folks can reach me at newsdissector.com.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of On the Edge with me, Max Keiser. I want to thank my guest, Danny Schechter, the News Dissector. If you want to send me an email, please do so at ontheedge@presstv.com. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.